The bronze singing bowl on Dr. Sarah Chen's desk caught the morning light as she stared at her latest patient file. Her hands trembled slightly, not from caffeine withdrawal, though she'd switched to green tea weeks ago, but from recognition. The metabolic markers, the cortisol levels, the sleep disruption patterns, they mirrored her own lab results from 6 months earlier. At 34, Sarah had become everything she'd never wanted, a physician who couldn't heal herself. Her white coat hung loose over a frame that fluctuated between stress-eating binges and guilt-driven fasting. The irony wasn't lost on her. She prescribed lifestyle changes while surviving on vending machine dinners and 3 hours of fragmented sleep. "Dr. Chen, your 8:30 is here." Her medical assistant's voice pulled her back. Sarah touched the small ceramic bowl on her desk, a gift from her Tibetan colleague, Dr. Tenzin, who'd noticed her eating lunch standing up, scrolling through patient charts. The bowl was simple, unglazed, roughly the size of her cupped palms. "Just use it for one meal," he'd said quietly. "See what happens when you slow down." She'd laughed it off then. Now, 3 weeks later, the bowl had become her anchor in the chaos of 12-hour shifts. Something about its weight, its deliberate smallness, made her pause before filling it, made her sit down, made her breathe. The patient knocked. Another executive with stress-induced insomnia, another prescription for sleep aids that would mask symptoms without addressing the nervous system stuck in perpetual overdrive. Sarah knew the pattern intimately. Her own medicine cabinet held the same pharmaceutical band-aids. But something had shifted since she'd started using the bowl. Not dramatically. She still worked brutal hours, still felt the familiar weight of exhaustion. But her relationship to eating had changed in ways she couldn't quite articulate. The bowl demanded presence. It made multitasking impossible. "Come in." As her patient settled into the chair, Sarah noticed his hands, constantly moving, checking his phone, tapping against his leg. The same restlessness that had driven her to meditation apps and stress management seminars that never quite stuck. "I can't sleep," he said. "I've tried everything. Melatonin, exercise, cutting caffeine. Nothing works." Sarah glanced at the bronze bowl, remembering Dr. Tenzin's words about Tibetan monastics who seemed to carry an unshakable calm despite living in one of the world's harshest climates. Their nervous systems, he'd explained, were trained through practices that seemed almost impossibly simple. "Tell me about your evening routine," she said, her fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of the small ceramic bowl. For the first time in months, she found herself genuinely curious about a patient's habits rather than rushing toward a prescription. The man's answer confirmed what she suspected. A mind that couldn't transition from day to night. A nervous system that had forgotten how to downshift, like looking in a mirror. But unlike 6 months ago, Sarah now had something to offer beyond pharmaceuticals. Something that had quietly begun, rewiring her own relationship with stillness, one mindful meal at a time. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. Dr. Tenzin found Sarah in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m., her ceramic bowl filled with leftover soup, eating with deliberate slowness despite the chaos around them. The emergency department buzzed with its usual late-night energy, but Sarah had carved out a pocket of calm at a corner table. "You're learning," he observed, settling across from her with his own simple meal. Sarah looked up, surprised to feel caught rather than embarrassed. 3 weeks of eating from the bowl had created an unexpected ritual. No phone, no charts, just the simple act of nourishing herself with attention. "It's strange," she admitted. "I eat less, but I feel more satisfied. Like my body finally has time to register what's happening." Dr. Tenzin nodded. "In Tibet, we have a saying, when you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you sleep, sleep." Your nervous system is learning to do one thing completely. This was the beginning of what Sarah would later recognize as her education in what Tibetan tradition called conscious transitions. Dr. Tenzin had introduced her to practices that seemed deceptively mundane. The mindful use of a simple bowl, deliberate breathing between patients, walking meditation down hospital corridors. Western medicine treats symptoms, he'd explained during one of their informal conversations. But Tibetan practice treats the nervous system itself. We train the mind to find stillness within activity, not just in the absence of stress. Sarah had initially resisted the idea of cold exposure, one of the practices Dr. Tenzin mentioned that monastics used to build resilience. But when her apartment's heating failed during a brutal winter week, she decided to experiment rather than immediately call for emergency repair. The first morning of waking in a 55-degree bedroom had been miserable. By the third day, something had shifted. Her body felt more alert, more alive. Her usual morning brain fog had lifted. Your vagus nerve is strengthening, Dr. Tenzin explained when she mentioned the unexpected energy. Cold exposure trains the nervous system to remain calm during stress. Monastics have known this for centuries. The changes were subtle but accumulating. Sarah found herself naturally taking 7 deep breaths between patient consultations, a micro-meditation Dr. Tenzin had demonstrated. During lunch, she ate in complete silence, focusing entirely on the food in her bowl. The practice felt revolutionary after years of mindless consumption. Her colleague, Dr. Martinez, had started noticing. You seem different lately. Calmer. Are you sleeping better? Sarah wasn't sleeping more. Her schedule remained demanding, but the quality had improved. She'd begun ending each day with what Dr. Tenzin called noble silence. 30 minutes without speaking, letting her mind settle like sediment in still water. The monastics understand something Western culture has forgotten, Doctor, Tenzin had told her. True strength comes not from forcing the mind to be calm, but from creating conditions where calmness arises naturally. As Sarah finished her soup, she realized the ceramic bowl had become more than an eating vessel. It had become a symbol of presence, a daily reminder that rushing through life was optional, that even in the chaos of emergency medicine, moments of stillness could be cultivated. The bronze singing bowl on her desk seemed to echo this discovery, its resonance a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern healing. 6 weeks into her experimentation with Tibetan practices, Sarah faced her first real test. The hospital announced mandatory overtime shifts due to staff shortages, 18-hour days that would push everyone beyond their limits. Her colleagues immediately began stockpiling energy drinks and complaining about the impossible schedule. But Sarah found herself curious rather than panicked. The practices Dr. Tenzin had introduced weren't just rituals anymore. They'd become a nervous system training program that she was eager to test under pressure. The first extended shift arrived like a storm. By hour 12, her usual pattern would have been complete depletion, brain fog, stress eating, emotional numbness. Instead, she discovered something unexpected. The micro-meditations had become automatic. Between patients, her breathing naturally deepened. During transitions, her mind reset itself without conscious effort. "How are you so calm right now?" Dr. Martinez asked during their brief break. Around them, other residents looked frayed, running on caffeine and determination. Sarah felt tired but strangely centered. "I've been practicing some Tibetan techniques," Sarah explained, holding her ceramic bowl filled with simple vegetable broth. "Nervous system training, basically." "Doctor." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Sounds very zen. Does it actually work, or is it just placebo effect?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Her latest lab results had shown measurable improvements: lower cortisol, better lipid profiles, improved inflammatory markers. But the real changes were subtler, a fundamental shift in how she moved through stress rather than fighting against it. The answer came during hour 16 of the shift, when a trauma case required 3 hours of intensive surgery. Normally, such situations left Sarah depleted for days. This time, she noticed her breathing naturally slowing during critical moments, her mind remaining clear despite the pressure. The practices had trained her nervous system to find equilibrium within chaos, rather than seeking calm only in its absence. "It's not about becoming Zen," she told Dr. Martinez later. "It's about training your body to respond differently to stress, like physical therapy for your nervous system." Her friend remained skeptical. "I don't have time for meditation retreats and mystical practices. I barely have time to eat properly." Sarah laughed, touching her bowl. "This is eating properly, and it takes the same amount of time as wolfing down food while checking your phone. Maybe less, because you actually feel satisfied." The conversation revealed something Sarah hadn't expected: resistance from people closest to her. Her efficiency and calmness, rather than inspiring curiosity, seemed to make some colleagues defensive, as if her steadiness implied criticism of their chaos. But Dr. Tenzin had prepared her for this. When you change your relationship with stress, others may feel threatened. They mistake your peace for judgment, when really it's just a different way of being human. That night, despite 18 hours of demanding work, Sarah fell asleep easily. No racing thoughts, no need for sleep aids. Her body had learned to transition from activity to rest without the usual struggle. As she drifted off, she reflected on the bronze singing bowl Dr. Tenzin had mentioned, how its resonance came not from force, but from finding the frequency where vibration became effortless. Her nervous system was learning the same principle. Would you rather force yourself with willpower, or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. 3 months into her Tibetan practice integration, Sarah faced an unexpected invitation that would test everything she'd learned. The hospital's chief of staff offered her a position in the prestigious cardiac surgery program, a dream opportunity that would require relocating to Boston and working even more demanding hours. "It's what you've always wanted," Dr. Martinez reminded her over coffee. "Why do you look conflicted?" Sarah stared into her cup, realizing that her relationship with ambition had fundamentally shifted. The position represented everything her younger self had craved: status, financial security, professional recognition. But now she found herself weighing those benefits against the nervous system stability she'd cultivated. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, Sarah admitted. Now I'm wondering if there's a way to excel without destroying my health in the process. This wasn't the response Dr. Martinez expected. "You're not going to let some Buddhist philosophy ruin your career, are you?" The comment stung because it revealed how others viewed her transformation. To them, her calmness and intentionality looked like lack of ambition rather than a different approach to excellence. That evening, Sarah met Dr. Tenzin in the hospital's small meditation room, a quiet space he'd helped establish for staff wellness. She brought her ceramic bowl, now filled with simple miso soup, and shared her dilemma. "In Tibetan tradition, we speak of right livelihood," he said thoughtfully. "Work that nourishes both your skills and your spirit, rather than consuming them." "But isn't some sacrifice necessary for meaningful work?" Sarah asked. Dr. Tenzin smiled. "Sacrifice, yes. Self-destruction, no. The monastics who maintain Tibet's medical traditions work intensively, but within rhythms that sustain rather than deplete. They understand that healing others requires maintaining your own foundation." The conversation planted a seed of possibility Sarah hadn't considered, negotiating the position terms to include the practices that had restored her equilibrium: remote work options for certain administrative tasks, scheduled breaks for the micro-meditations that had become essential, a work environment that supported rather than undermined nervous system health. What if they say no? Sarah wondered. Then you'll know their priorities, Dr. Tenzin replied. And you can make an informed choice about whether those align with the person you're becoming. The bronze singing bowl on her desk seemed to echo with new meaning as Sarah prepared for the conversation with the Chief of Staff. The bowl's resonance came from finding the right frequency, not from forcing sound through resistance. Maybe career advancement could follow the same principle. Over the next week, Sarah practiced what she would later recognize as purposeful inefficiency, slowing her movements between tasks, walking meditation-style through hospital corridors, allowing transitions to become moments of presence rather than rushed urgency. The practice felt countercultural in a medical environment obsessed with speed, but it maintained the nervous system calm that had become her foundation. When colleagues commented on her unusual pace, Sarah found herself explaining the neuroscience behind deliberate movement, how it activated the prefrontal cortex while calming the amygdala, creating space for better decision-making under pressure. The ceramic bowl had taught her that satisfaction came not from consuming more, but from fully experiencing what was present. Perhaps career growth could follow the same wisdom. Depth rather than simply accumulation, sustainability rather than burnout disguised as dedication. The meeting with the Chief of Staff became Sarah's moment of truth as she sat across from Dr. Williams. Her ceramic bowl, now a permanent fixture on her desk, seemed to anchor her in a calm she'd never accessed during high-stakes conversations. "We're impressed with your recent performance," Dr. Williams began. "Your patient satisfaction scores are exceptional, and your colleagues mention a remarkable composure under pressure. The cardiac team specifically requested you." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of excitement, but underneath lay something new. Clarity about what she truly wanted versus what she'd been conditioned to pursue. "I'm honored by the opportunity," she said carefully. "I'd like to discuss how we might structure the position to maintain the practices that have improved my effectiveness." Dr. Williams looked puzzled. Practices? Sarah had rehearsed this conversation, drawing on Dr. Tenzin's guidance about presenting ancient wisdom in contemporary context. "I've been implementing stress reduction techniques based on Tibetan medical traditions, nervous system training that's improved my diagnostic accuracy and surgical steadiness. I'd like to continue these as part of my professional development." She outlined her requests, scheduled transition time between procedures for brief meditative resets, permission to maintain her mindful eating practices, including the use of her ceramic bowl in the staff dining area, accommodation for the cold exposure and breathing exercises that had become essential to her morning routine. "This sounds like alternative medicine," Dr. Williams said, his tone skeptical. "It's nervous system science," Sarah replied. "We know that vagal tone affects immune function, that mindful eating improves metabolic health, that controlled breathing enhances surgical precision. These aren't mystical practices. They're evidence-based approaches to maintaining peak performance." The conversation revealed something profound that Sarah would later identify as the central secret of her transformation. She was no longer negotiating from scarcity or fear. The Tibetan practices hadn't just changed her habits, they'd rewired her relationship with her own worth and power. Dr. Tenzin had explained this phenomenon during one of their recent conversations. When your nervous system is regulated, you stop making decisions from anxiety. You can see clearly what serves you and what doesn't. The bowl had been her first teacher in this principle. By eating slowly, mindfully, she'd learned to recognize satiation, both physical and emotional. The practice had taught her that enough was a feeling, not a quantity. The same principle applied to work. She could contribute meaningfully without consuming herself. Dr. Williams granted most of her requests, intrigued despite his initial skepticism. "I've never had a surgeon negotiate for meditation time before." "Maybe that's why so many of us burn out," Sarah observed. 3 weeks later, as Sarah prepared for her transition to the cardiac program, she reflected on the unexpected journey from exhaustion to equilibrium. The bronze singing bowl on her desk had become a symbol of resonance achieved through finding the right frequency rather than applying more force. Dr. Martinez, initially skeptical of Sarah's Zen phase, had begun asking questions about the practices. "I noticed you never get that afternoon crash anymore, and you seem, I don't know, more yourself somehow." The ceramic bowl sat between them as Sarah shared what she'd learned, that transformation happened not through dramatic overhauls, but through small, consistent habits that gradually rewired the nervous system's default responses. "It's not about becoming a monk," Sarah explained. "It's about remembering that you have choices in how you respond to stress." The secret wasn't in the bowl itself, but in what it represented, the possibility of bringing presence to the most ordinary moments, allowing ancient wisdom to quietly revolutionize modern life. 2 years later, Sarah stood in her new office in Boston, arranging the familiar bronze singing bowl on her desk. The cardiac surgery program had exceeded her expectations, but not in the ways she'd originally imagined. Rather than simply advancing her career, the position had become a laboratory for integrating Tibetan wisdom with contemporary medicine. Her ceramic eating bowl sat nearby, now accompanied by similar bowls she'd given to residents interested in the mindful eating practices that had transformed her relationship with nourishment and stress. The small vessel had sparked conversations about nervous system health that were gradually shifting the department's culture. "Dr. Chen, your 3 p.m. patient is asking about the breathing techniques you taught her," her assistant mentioned. "She says they helped more than the medication." Sarah smiled, remembering her own skepticism about simple practices carrying profound power. The patient was a high-stress executive whose arrhythmia had improved significantly after incorporating brief meditation periods and mindful eating habits into her daily routine. Dr. Martinez visited from their old hospital, marveling at the changes in both Sarah and her new environment. "You look settled," she observed. "Like you found what you were looking for without realizing you'd been searching." The transformation hadn't been dramatic or immediate. Instead, it had unfolded through hundreds of small choices, using the ceramic bowl for every meal, taking 7 conscious breaths between patients, maintaining morning cold exposure even during travel, honoring transition times as sacred space rather than rushing between activities. The residents here seemed different too, Dr. Martinez noticed. Less frantic, more present. Sarah had introduced optional nervous system training sessions for staff, teaching the micro-meditations, mindful eating practices, and breathing techniques that had rewired her own stress responses. The bronze bowl had become a teaching tool, demonstrating how resonance arose from finding the right frequency rather than forcing sound through resistance. "We're tracking patient outcomes," Sarah explained. "Preliminary data shows that staff who practice these techniques have improved diagnostic accuracy and patient satisfaction scores." The real revelation had come 6 months earlier, during a particularly challenging surgery. As complications arose, Sarah had noticed her breathing naturally slowing, her mind clearing rather than racing. The thousands of micro-meditations had trained her nervous system to find calm within chaos, rather than seeking peace only in its absence. Her lab results told part of the story: normalized cortisol, improved inflammatory markers, enhanced immune function. But the deeper change was qualitative, a fundamental shift in how she moved through the world. The ceramic bowl had taught her that satisfaction came from presence, not quantity. The cold exposure had trained her nervous system to find equilibrium under stress. The mindful transitions had shown her that rushing was optional, that each moment contained choice points between reaction and response. As evening approached, Sarah prepared for her final patient consultation. She touched the bronze bowl gently, listening to its clear, sustained tone. The sound seemed to echo something Dr. Tenzin had told her years earlier. True strength comes not from building walls against difficulty, but from developing the flexibility to bend without breaking. The bowl's resonance faded into silence, leaving only the quiet recognition that transformation had arrived not through force, but through surrender. One conscious breath, one mindful meal, one purposeful moment at a time. Outside her office window, Boston's evening lights began to twinkle, reflecting the ancient truth that unbreakable minds were sculpted through practices so simple they seemed invisible, yet profound enough to quietly revolutionize a life. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.